Good afternoon. You guys act like I'm an old timer here. I'm Rob. I'm a Christian, and I retired from the pastorate. I pastored in one church, a Pioneer Bible Church, for over 40 years, and I retired in no, that's not true. It's that other century. 2016. And my wife and I and my daughter and her family moved to Shingle Springs, and we built 2 houses there in 2018. So I wanted to say, by way of introduction, that, and then people ask me, I hear people start talking about Foothill Church. And I want to tell you a number of things I tell people about Foothill Church. Number one, you got great preachers. And whether it's Brian or Phil or Dylan's a little, but or Sam. Okay, I didn't want to leave anybody out and hurt their feelings. They just do a great job, you know. Smiley Dylan, yeah. And number two, and I usually tell this in small groups, that, you know, you all care for each other. In my Bible study, they just pray for one another, and they're visiting one another. And in our age group, we don't get out all the time. Our friends get homebound, and you're looking after them, praying for them, taking care of them. And the third thing I tell them, if you want good music, come on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. In my years as a pastor, I went through the worship war. So I don't want to start that back up again, but I just think y'all do a great job here. So it touches my heart. In fact, I was sitting there weeping. I have struggled with depression for a lifetime, all my adult life. And I remember I ran across a story of how David encouraged Saul's spirit. Well, I'm just here to tell you it doesn't work. Every time I listen to Christian music, it makes me cry. So you have to try something else to encourage your spirit, lift you up. I'd like to talk to you about faithfulness in ministry is the name of the talk. The stories I'd like to tell you really were prompted from a sermon that Pastor Brian gave the other day. And he said, he challenged us, he does this refresh every fall, and he challenged us to reach out into our community, and particularly those in need. And eventually I'll get to that, but I want to talk to you about outreach by a guy who doesn't want to do that. So, but I'd like to start with I'm going to intersperse a little Bible study throughout the portion. I won't bore you with it, but in order to understand Scripture properly, we often find challenging truths that have to be balanced. So we got grace, we got to balance it with truth. We got mercy, we have to balance it with justice. And so the pastorate, you're a leader, but you're also a servant. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, it says, so let a man consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. And moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. And so there actually are 2 Greek words here. One is for servant, and the other is for steward. And steward's mentioned twice. And that one is not the one I want to talk about. Servant is, the Greek word is actually literally means under rower. And it reminds me, as I think about that word, I watched the movie Ben-Hur. Maybe you know that movie. he gets arrested and enslaved, really. And the scene that I think of as an under-rower is when they're below decks in the Roman warship, and these 20 or 30 guys are lined up. Everybody's got an oar, and all they're doing is pulling, just over and over again. And it occurred to me that in the Christian world, as a pastor, number one, it's repetitive. Same old, same old. You know what? You get that one sermon done, you know what you got to look forward to? One more sermon. One person dies, you know what you got to look forward to? Someone else is going to die, and there's going to be another board meeting, another board meeting. It's just repetitive. And the other thing that happens, that guy below deck rowing, he doesn't know where the ship's going. And that's the kind of pastor I was. You may remember the last time I talked to you, I talked about receiving 4 phone calls. I got a phone call from 5 phone calls, really. First one was, would you speak for 2 weeks at Pioneer Bible Church? I did that for 40 years. And then I got called, the jail chaplain called me and said, would you cover for me? And I'm really getting exhausted. Would you cover for me and speak at the jail? And I said yes, and I did that for 18 years. And then I had a gentleman call me from the El Dorado County Food Bank. And just out of the blue, he said, would you take over the food distribution in South County? And so I did. And another phone call I got was from an outfit called Recovery in Action. It's a drug and alcohol addiction program. I mentioned these to you last time. And so I got into a weekly teaching of drug and alcohol recovery from a Christian perspective is what they wanted. They had the Buddhist perspective that was the foundation for their ministry and the Native American Indian perspective. But some of the clientele were complaining and they wanted a Christian perspective. Now see, those 5 phone calls were just out of the blue. I didn't know where the ship was going. You know what I was getting paid to do? Row. Just row. And so, I'll tell you a little bit about rowing. When I went to Bible school, I went to the Bible Institute in Sacramento, and Sacramento Bible Institute, and I went there 3 years, I was going to say I got a degree, but I didn't get a degree. I didn't get anything. I have no theological degrees. But they taught me 2 things for sure. They taught me how to study the Bible, and they taught me how to preach. And but they didn't teach me how to minister to people in life. Somebody gave me this little book here. It's called a Minister's Manual. Christian Minister's Manual. Printed in 1965. And you know what I found? I'd look up funeral and do what it said. I had no funeral experience. I just did what it said. And you know what? It worked out pretty good. I'm good at funerals. But back to Pastor Brian's sermon. Also look up, I did a wedding this weekend for my granddaughter. I look at this book and in order to find out where's the bride stand, where the groomsmen stand, all that, and one person told me I've never been to a wedding before. Interesting. But Pastor Brian said that we should reach out into the community, particularly those that need. And early in my ministry, I knew that I needed to do that. I ought to do that. But how? Something that was real popular back in those days, I mean, I don't know who it was popular with, but I kept hearing about it, was door-to-door visitation. How many of you ever done door-to-door visitation? Okay, well, I guess you all the ones who are encouraging people to do that. It was way too scary for me. You know, I spent a weekend with Campus Crusade because that's where my girlfriend was serving that summer. And they took me to the beach, and so I go towel to towel. This is not door to door, this is towel to towel. And witnessing to people about Jesus. And I even got into a door-to-door evangelism thing when I was at Biola College. But now I'm in Somerset. And I'm scared to death. I'm not going to do that. I'd rather feel guilty than do that. So, how am I going to reach out to the community? And I knew I needed to do that, so I just started where I was. I had a kid in second grade. No, it was before that. I had a kid in kindergarten. And so I volunteered as a parent volunteer. I'd go in and volunteer in the classroom. My funniest story there was I was on the teacher would always give me the bad kids. You know, that was just take them outside and run them for a while so we could get them back in. But anyway, one day we're linking blocks, ABCs. And the kid's stuck at K. So I'm down, and we're crawling around the floor, you know. And I said, what's your problem? He says, I can't find the elemento. So I started volunteering, and one thing I was into was sports. And so I volunteered to be a referee. I referee anything. I don't referee volleyball, but I'll referee anything else. Basketball, football, wrestling. I love to referee wrestling because I can get right down there on the mat with those kids. But at any rate, so I started volunteering to do refereeing for them. And, you know, we're an impoverished school district. We're playing basketball on asphalt. You know, so I'm out there running with the kids and refereeing these games. And I got to know the coaches and the PE teacher and volunteered to go help him teach PE. Everybody could always use a student aid. Well, as I began to be known in the school, you remember how the phone call came from the superintendent, see if I'd run for school board. I'm going from being a pastor to a politician. I don't know if I'd do that again, but at any rate, I did it. But I did it with everybody's blessing. I called every elder. I called my father, who I sure would tell me that was an evil thing. But they all gave me the blessing. I went. But you know what? At school, who am I interacting with? Interacting with kids. You know, you don't get much credit for outreach in the community talking to kids. But I was also interacting with teachers. But most of the teachers were commuting from outside the community back in. They were never going to come to church, at our church. A lot of them went to church, but none of them were going to come to our church. And so I thought, is there another place? And I love women. Kind of. But in the church, you got to love women because the women basically make the church functional. I would say they run the church, but that's against the rules. So, that's where the church is founded on service of ladies. You know who's missing? The men. And so I thought, well, getting in contact with men, reaching out to the community and getting men would be a good thing. And I had no idea how to do that. You may not, it looks really like I'm a really friendly guy up here talking to you and telling jokes and stuff. Basically, I'm antisocial. I rode a bus from Los Angeles to Sacramento one time and never said a word. Yes, there was somebody sitting right next to me. I flew to Africa one time and I listened to this guy speak, or this lady speak. I thought it was French to start out with, but it evidently was Italian. That was a very limited conversation. You know, it's just not my thing. I've gotten better. Did I tell you about my Taylor-Johnson temperament analysis test? You can score from 1 to 99 on expressiveness. I got a 2. It's not my thing. But you can't say, God told me I had to do the work of evangelism. I had to reach out to the community. And so I had a friend in the volunteer fire department and in the church. And he took me to the volunteer fire department. Now, I was kind of a fish out of water because it was a very uncomfortable setting for me because I wasn't mechanical. I remember sitting on a school board discussion one time, and they're going to buy a bus. And we had to talk about engines, transmissions, rear ends, you know, and all these truck drivers knew all about that stuff. I didn't know anything about it. I go to the fire department, I don't know their skills. I don't know their, everybody had to have a radio. I didn't have a radio. I mean, we're talking in the 70s here. You know, so I didn't know any of that jargon. And it really wasn't just my thing to go out and just hang with the guys and chit-chat. Well, I had one other problem, but I joined. I got in, they joined me, they assigned me to a squad, and I was, you know, I was going to training every week. But I had a problem, though. I don't drink alcoholic beverage, and alcohol was a big deal at every meeting. We'd train on Thursday nights and start drinking. We'd have a monthly meeting on Sunday evenings, and they'd have a beer raffle. Everybody'd be drinking. See how funny the Lord is? I thought, well, I should participate in the raffle. Give them some of my money, encourage the program. That's okay. I gave him my $1. The bad news is I won. And so now I'm stuck with a 6-pack of beer. What do I do with it? Well, my friend was there, and so he came and took care of it for me, and we were good. But early in my ministry, I made a decision I didn't have to look like, talk like, or act like my constituents. I didn't have to look like an inmate, act like an inmate. I didn't have to act like an addict or alcoholic. I didn't even have to act like a fireman in a social kind of way. Now, I know there's this balancing ideas. That's my idea over here. You may have a different way to get in with people over here. Lots of winery kind of vino appreciate. That's a good thing, but over here it's not for me. It's not for me. So Jesus prayed in John 17, I do not ask you, the Father, to take them, the disciples, out of the world, but to keep them from the evil one. You're not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have also sent them into the world. So I'm sent into the world. I got to be out there with these guys. And it took a while, but eventually I became accepted by them. Accepted so much that they decided to buy near beer for me. I tasted that stuff and I said, you don't have to do this for me. I'm good. I can just sit and watch. But you may remember last time I talked about being a CPR and first aid trainer. And why was I asked to do that? Because I could talk. Most of these men had lots more training. They're EMTs and all, lots more training than me. No way are they going to stand in front of a group and run a training session. So I became the trainer, and I was accepted in training CPR, all these guys with CPR and stuff. And so I became one of the guys, so to speak. I had two specialties. We'd go on calls. The two specialties were 1144s and 5150s. Now, if you have some kind of background in that world, you know that 1144s are fatalities, a death scene. And a 5150 is a crazy person. I don't know if that's politically acceptable to say, but so every time there'd be a death, the guys would say, Rob, you go talk to that lady over there, her husband just died. 5150, there's a crazy person sitting in the parking lot on the curb. Rob, they'll be here in about an hour. You want to sit here with this person? And, you know, the reality is, I didn't have any idea what to say to those folks. But what I found was I could be a comforter with a listening ear, just listening to them. Ministry of presence. Just being there. I might say something, word of comfort, hope. Sometimes I might pray for them. I always ask permission if I'm going to pray, though. You know, I'm not here to be an offense. I'm not pushing religion on people. But I'm there. And you know what? Everybody else is gone. And it never failed. They would always ask Pastor Rob to go to the side of the grieving widow. And so that was one of my specialties. And the 5150 was, that came in handy when I went to jail ministry. But it was, it's just different. You know, I don't try to talk to people that are on psychotic episodes, reason with them, or a drunk alcoholic. There's no point in trying to talk with them. You can just sit there with them and listen to them maybe. But, you know, it's going to be a challenge to me to not tell you repetitive stories. But the good news is you probably don't remember anything from May anyway. So I'm going to tell you two death scene stories. One really was the end of my fire department career. I always had a radio with me anywhere I went, and they'd tone it out, and I'd go. And this particular incident was just a mile or so from the church, and so I left my office, jumped in my truck, not a fire truck, and so I'm first on scene. And I walk in this room, this guy who is a little older than me, but one of my fellow firemen, walks over with a baby in his hands and hands it to me. It's a Sid's death. Baby had died in the crib, and so he hands me this baby. And so I start doing CPR on the baby. Finally, the ambulance gets there, and they say, well, you continue doing CPR all the way to the hospital. And so I'm sitting there. They hook up a mask, a face mask to handle the air, and I'm just sitting there doing these little compressions on this baby. And, of course, the baby doesn't live. And so I sit with the guy who drove the ambulance to the hospital, and we sit and cry in the hospital. And I'm telling you, we're pretty two tough-looking guys. When an infant dies, it tears everybody up. And so later that night, a buddy of mine who was a paramedic, been through this a number of times, called me and says, Rob, you want to talk? You know what I said? No, I'm fine. But you know what? I never wanted to respond to an incident ever after that. That radio would go off, and I'm an adrenalized guy. And that radio would go off, man, my adrenaline start pumping. I'd be jumping in my car and run into a fire truck just to get to the action, you know. The adrenaline was gone. A year later, the chief calls me and says, Rob, you haven't been to a training in a year. I said, yeah, I know. He says, we'll make it convenient for you. You can train anytime, anywhere. We'll work with you. But you know what? My soul for action had died. I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. And that incident hit me in a way that I would never have expected, but it did. The second story is this couple in our church, or not in our church, in our community. Babysitter had taken their two little girls, preschoolers, out of the house one night, gotten in a car accident. Both of the girls were killed. So one of my buddies in the fire department said he knew this father. He said, Rob, would you go talk to him? You know, he asked me to visit the home after the babies had died. I didn't know the man. I didn't know what to say to him. But you know what? I kept rolling. And so I went. I can't tell you how many times in the middle of the night I've gone out, jumped in my truck, and start praying James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives liberally to all men and without reproach, and it will be given to him. And so I just go. I went to that home and talked to the mother, to the father, listened to them. I probably prayed with them. That was in 1982. And you know, one of the things that as a pastor, I just want to be a servant. What can I do for you? I remember one time I went to the family and their son had committed suicide, shot himself in a car. Car was in a parking lot in Sacramento. I really don't know what possessed me to offer this, but I said, hey, can I take care of the car for you? So I went down to Sacramento, got the car, took it to a shop that specialized in cleaning up cars after these kinds of incidents, and got their car cleaned up for them. That sounds terrible, but it really wasn't that bad. I was surprised at how clean the car was. So I said, what can I do for you? And they said, well, we've got it was the week before Christmas. We got all these Christmas gifts for our children. Would you give them to somebody in the community? And so I said yes. I found a poor family with some kids, took the gifts to them. You know, one of the things about hanging in there for 40 years in ministry, do you know that ministry takes time? Lives change over time. Mostly, I've not seen lives change quickly. In this case, 1982, December 1982, his children died. 1984, his wife was baptized. 1994, he was baptized. I have this vision of him. I'm reaching for my Bible that's not here. But have this vision of him drinking straight out of a whiskey bottle that night I went to visit him. Proverbs chapter 31, we all know the second half, which is about the ladies, the righteous women. The first half is about the king. And his mother is giving him a lecture. And the lecture is what he shouldn't do. Wine is not for you, O Lemuel. You got it? Can I look at it and read it? Thank you for Christians in the audience. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. You know, that father, he had a reason to get drunk. Thank you so much. But 12 years later, he's a born-again Christian, and I'm baptizing him. See, it takes time. And it wasn't long after that, at a Christmas program at the church. You think Christmas is ever the same for this guy? He gave his testimony at our Christmas program. Today, eventually in 1995, he became a deacon. Today, he's treasurer of pregnancy counseling service. He just is so excited about that ministry in Placerville, unwed mothers, and giving ladies the real choice. Back row of our church, there was a group of ladies that sat there every week. There actually were, I have 7 names down here on my notes that I'm not going to tell you. They were what I call spiritually single women. And they were, well, let me read you 1 Peter 3. It says, likewise, you wives, be subject to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation, the behavior of the wives, while they behold your chaste behavior coupled with fear. You know, there's a lot of ladies in the church whose husbands don't come to church, whose husbands probably don't know the Lord. And my heart went out to these ladies, and they were wonderful women. They were faithful to God in church every week, serving where they could. They were always limited because they respected their husbands. They were faithful to their husbands. They were all involved in lifelong marriages. And, you know, it was my silent goal, and actually I didn't tell anyone. This is the first time I've spoken this out loud. It was my silent goal to help them win their husbands. Now, how could I do that? I determined that I was going to be nice to them when I saw them at special events in church. Do you know that a husband that doesn't go to church many times will come to something really special with their wife? You know, a Christmas program or whatever, it's just, they'll come. And it was my drive to go be nice to them, you know, to talk to them about them, not about me, not about the church, about them. I want to talk to you about you, what you're interested in. This one gentleman, he was an educator, and he told me he had a football background from before the war. And that war would be World War II. And so he'd tell me stories about how he went to the University of Santa Clara and how good they were and how they went to Georgia Tech and played them. And you know, I'm a football nut. Now, I'm an Oklahoma football nut, but I'm sit there and listen to him and talk to him and just be interested in what he's interested in. I went to a hunter's retreat at Pog Pines Baptist Church one year, and one of my guys went there, one of these guys. You know what I sat and talked to him about the whole night? Guns, what he had shot. I never owned a gun in my life. Have no interest. But he did. And so I talked to him about hunting and where he had hunted and what big game he had shot. I was trying to earn the right to minister to them. These 7 guys, they're listed out right there. One of them was the one I offered to go get the car about. Son had committed suicide in the car. They let me do that. They let me get in and get close. Another one accepted Christ, and he turned from alcohol when he was near death in a hospital. I went and visited him. I prayed with him. He recovered and became a regular attender with his wife. Another one accepted Christ and began attending church with his wife and became a greeter at our Sunday morning services. Now, I'm not talking about overnight. I'm talking about years these things took. Another one was helping me frame my house 2 years ago. Or so. You know, now the truth is, some have died or are dying, and I don't know that they have Christ. But I think everyone would welcome me into their home. You know what? We're stewards of the gospel. God's the one who saves their soul. Those 7 women are pretty special to me, and so are their husbands. You know, for me, it was totally against my nature to reach out into the community and start meeting people and talking to them, and particularly go out with men. Sometime I'll talk to you about, I kind of got the sense I'm here to stay. So I'll talk to you about the jail ministry, my ministry with outlaw bikers. God's interesting where these phone calls come from. He's the one on top directing the ship. You know where I'm at? I'm just rowing. Sometimes I complain about it, but I'm still rowing. So, let me lead us in prayer. Heavenly Father, I'm reminded at this moment that Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Lord, I observe that it's not a quick building project. But you are the one in charge of the ship, and Lord, I determined years ago to be a faithful servant and steward. Father, I pray you give these folks hope. I'm sure they've been praying for some folks and talking to some folks and befriending some folks for years. Lord, some of those people are going to turn to Christ. Give them hope. Father, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.